The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. I myself will see him with my own eyes. Blessed are those who mourn, for you shall be comforted. I am sure that neither death nor life, nor things to come, nor height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, nor has the heart of man conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. Jesus says, "Behold, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives and believes in me, they shall never die." This afternoon, we have gathered and the violence of those who see no place for difference on this island. Whether we have come today as a person of convicted faith or honest questions, whether we have walked through the doors of this cathedral as president or prime minister, politician or police officer, personal friend or close family member, we each come to express our grief and our shock, our tears and our loss. Above all, today, we offer our heartfelt sympathy and our personal prayers to Lyra's mother, Joan, her partner, Sarah, her sisters, Joan, Nicola, and Mary, her brothers, Gary and David, and each of you who is part of her wider circle of family and friends. Lyra was a person who broke down barriers and reached across boundaries. This was her hallmark in life, and this is her legacy in death. As a journalist, she pursued truth wherever it took her, never content with the sullen silence of unanswered questions. Lyra was a child of the Good Friday Agreement. She was a primary school pupil in North Belfast when the agreement was signed. She grew up to champion its hope for a society that was free from the prejudices of the past and open to the possibilities of a new future for the peoples of these islands. In this cathedral, behind me, the soaring spire of hope was added in 2007 as a visual symbol of the new hopes of the Good Friday Agreement. With resurrection hope, this spire pierces glass ceilings of old histories. It points upwards to a new and better future. This is the future that Lyra lived for, loved for, and longed for. In this Easter week, when bitter violence has not only claimed the life of Lyra, but the lives of over 300 innocent people in Sri Lanka, let us, in this service of remembrance and celebration, hold to a God-given hope that Lyra's legacy will call each of us to break down barriers and reach across boundaries. And so let us bow our heads in prayer. God of life and love, by the resurrection of Jesus, you point us to a true faith and a sure hope. Strengthen this faith and hope in us all our days, that we may live as those who believe in the communion of God's faith-filled people, the forgiveness of sinful words and actions, and the Easter resurrection to life eternal. Through Jesus Christ, our saving Redeemer. Amen.
When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Here ends the reading.
Good afternoon, everybody. Eamon Holmes, after participating in George Best's funeral, said that even if he lived to be 100 and was awarded a knighthood, that would remain the proudest, most important, and also the most reluctant duty of his life. I feel exactly the same today. My name is Stephen Lusty, but to all Lyra's friends and family, I was simply known as Lusty, or occasionally Uncle Stevie. I've been asked today to say a few words on behalf of all of Lyra's friends. I see a lot of you here today. There are many more outside, and thousands with us in spirit across the world. Lyra had many friends, drawn from all walks of life, all shapes, all sizes, genders, interests, and views were welcomed. There were no formulas or tick boxes in her world. You just needed to be a good person. The fact that I, a middle-class, middle-aged, Protestant, heterosexual, British male engineer, bears testament to that. But like anyone who knew her as a personal friend, I was just her mate Lusty. The country, and in recent days, the world have come to know her through her work, but professional and public life side of Lyra was only the tip of a very large iceberg. I shall aim to tell you a little bit about what it was like to be her friend. The name Lyra comes from the lyre, small harp-like instrument favoured by musicians in ancient times, including Orpheus. When Orpheus was killed, his lyre was thrown into the river. An eagle was sent by Zeus to recover the lyre, and the eagle and the instrument are both placed in the sky. In the 2nd century, the astronomer Ptolemy named that constellation Lyra. Lyra is not here in person, but her starlight fills this room. She would be thrilled that all her friends could be in one place and they could finally get to be connected. Lyra was smart, kind, passionate, interesting, feisty, generous, funny, and above all else, truly compassionate. Today is my honour to give you just a few examples of these virtues and an indication of some of the good times that we had together. Lyra was introduced to me by a mutual friend called Kim Johnson. At that time, I was still working as a technology executive in Dublin, but I'd always put aside some time to mentor and coach emerging talent. Kim was insistent that I met her, so on my next trip to Belfast, I did. Lyra had forwarded me on some documents and ideas, and they were all very good. However, I was astounded when I was met with ripped jeans, holes in her trainers, a 12-year-old still using her school bag. Within 2 minutes, though, I was blown away. I was listening to the best pitch I'd ever received. This young lady was very special. It was not long before Lyra decided that she wanted to focus on journalism rather than the world of technology. But not before we had some great sport with the dark underworld of venture capitalists. One Monday, I took her to Limerick University to pitch for investment. On the journey there, she was nervous and spent the whole time scribbling notes on pieces of paper and calming herself by reacquainting me with the industrial language that I had not heard since I left Holland and Wolff Shipyard. When we arrived and checked in to the conference, the receptionist said to me, "I'm sorry, sir, bring your daughter to work day was last week." Well, you can guess the reaction, but within an hour, Lyra had a dozen high-powered American technology investors eating out of her hands. The nerves were gone, and she was mesmerizing the entire room. Many of you will have watched her TED Talk, which was simply brilliant, but it was not a flash in the pan, but built upon 10 years of grafting and practice. In those early days, Lyra was fearless and naive in equal measures. It gave her a charm that she never really lost. She rang me one day and said, "Lusty, I'm going to Dublin to see the Taoiseach. Would you like to come with me?" I said, "Yes, of course." But when I inquired about the logistics of the event, she replied, "I'm not sure. Can you ring him and find out when he's free?" I wasn't able to manage to get the Taoiseach, but I'd been doing a little bit of work with the late Brian Lenihan, and he kindly gave her 10 minutes of his time. The next time I met Brian, he said to me, "What a star, but I'd rather do 10 rounds in a boxing ring with Paisley than do that again." The current Taoiseach, Dr. Varadkar, has kindly joined us today. When you retire this evening, sir, check your pockets. If you come across a crumpled note with a list of bizarre but totally fascinating questions on it, you'll know where they've come. Lyra and I both grew up in North Belfast and often compared notes on what it was like in the 1970s and 2000s. It was a tough place to grow up in both times, but she always insisted that spending a night at my house was much, much worse. My guest quarters has always doubled up as my museum for my collection of antique taxidermy, so she did have a point. Waking up in the morning and being met by the piercing gaze of a Victorian tiger head can cause nightmares. I think that had a lot to do with her subsequent love-hate relationship with her beloved cat Marie. Everyone knows how skilled Lyra was as an investigative journalist. I'm not qualified to comment on her professional work, but I think I can explain why she was so good at it early in her career. The American psychologist Anders Ericsson once postulated that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert. By the time Lyra was 21, she had applied 9,500 of those hours interrogating her friends and family. That could be fun, random, scary, or hilarious. Some of my favourite questions from those early years are, Lusty, why do Protestants eat more vegetables than Catholics? And do they actually teach you that at school? If men get so excited and pent up about watching sport, why do all my straight friends tell me they're so rubbish at sex? IBM may have spent billions developing artificial intelligence machines to create random thoughts. All they needed to do was talk to Lyra. And she never stopped doing it. Before I met Sarah, one of my duties was as her female behavioural consultant. She wanted an older straight man's view on romantic situations. I was honoured to be asked, but after a while I came to realise she asked the same questions to half a dozen other people, collated and compared the feedback, ignored it all, and did exactly what her heart told her anyway. One day she said to me, Lusty, if there was one thing that I could do to be better at impressing hot women, what would that be? I told her I knew exactly what that was, that it wasn't an instant fix, and that I would send her something to start her on that journey. The next day my package arrived. Lyra was relieved that it was not something she needed to hide from Mrs. McKee, but was most disappointed to discover that it was a copy of Delia Smith's book, How to Cook. To give her dues, she tried, but from the laughter you've just heard, I can tell that many of us here today were on that journey with her. There were many times when her social media posts contained photos of culinary projects. Was that dinner or the fading embers of an 11th night bonfire? Irish stew or lemon meringue pie? We could never tell. Sarah assures me that it did get better, but I remain unconvinced. As an investigative journalist, Lyra worked in an online world and received more than her fair share of abuse, cyberbullying and trolling, but she never hated anyone. However, Delia Smith came close on a few occasions. Thus you now know the reason why Lyra loved to eat out. I always knew this, but I didn't quite understand the full extent of her love for fine dining until my accountant called me one day and said, Stephen, you run an IT company. Yes. Can you explain why your biggest expenditure is Nando's? Followed by, I've reviewed your expenses, and I sincerely hope that the name of L. McKee can be cross-referenced to one of your best-paying clients. On Sunday evening at Mrs. McKee's house, I was chatting with another of Lyra's friends. I told her that at times I didn't feel like one of her best mates because I fell with her twice a year. I was assured that this was way better than the average of 4 or 5, and that one of her very special friends, who I'm sure is here today, managed 6 times in a single week. You could never fall out with Lyra in person. It was always online. As a journalist, she lived in a world of questions. With her friends, there were 2 types of questions. One that she wanted answers to so she could make a decision, and ones that she was looking for answers for to support a decision that she'd already made. If you got it wrong, then you had precisely 15 seconds before the burning fuse reached the powder keg. Lyra is the only person that I have ever met that has a block, delete, excommunicate button on her Apple Mac. It never lasted long, though. She never huffed, bore grudges, and there was never little that couldn't be put right with a hug and a Nando's. Lyra was a great friend. Several years ago, my world turned upside down. In an instant, an ideal lifestyle and a golden future were gone, and I found myself in a pretty dark place. It was a type of event that I thought only ever found in television dramas, but no, it was very real, and nobody's fault but mine. I was scared, lonely, and isolated. Almost everyone that I knew turned away or faced the other direction. But Lyra was one of 2 friends who sought me out. First up was a full-on 20-minute tongue-lashing on how on earth I could have let myself down so badly. Her compassion always came with a spoonful of tough love, but she was always there for me. When Lyra told you, call me anytime, she meant it. More than once during those dark days, she chatted with me through the night just to make sure that we both saw the sunrise. That time seems so long ago now, but I would not be the strong, healthy, happy, passionate man I am today if it not were the support of a handful of great people. Lyra McKee was at the core of that group. I know that she's done similar things for many of you here today, so as many of us are other extra reasons to be thankful. Call Me Anytime worked both ways, but Lyra and I had agreed that if it was after 10 p.m. at night, she would use it in emergencies. Yes, you've guessed it, Lyra's emergencies were indeed eclectic, and as eclectic as her personality. Some of the more legendary ones include, Lusty, I've been round this hire car 14 times and there's definitely no petrol cap. I'm at a party. I've broken the tab on my last can of cider. You're an engineer. How can I get into it without losing the contents? Lusty, I'm talking to this cute babe and she's a bit cross-eyed. How do I know if she's eyeing me up or not? There was one real emergency though. Lyra had been to an award dinner in Dublin, and rather than stay over, she had decided to get the bus back to Belfast. I got the call to say that there were no taxis at the terminus and that she couldn't walk home because she was wearing high heels. Alarm bells immediately went off. When I got there, her poor little dainty size 4 feet, which had not been clothed in anything other than slippers or Converse trainers ever since I'd known her, looked like deep-fried pig's trotters covered in tomato sauce. Anyway, we got her safely home, but Lyra, being Lyra, was more worried about the shoes. They weren't hers. Having young kids, my car was fully loaded with kitchen roll, wet wipes, glue, toothbrushes, and various cleaning materials. We patched them up, and the incident was never mentioned again. I don't know who she borrowed them from, but I'm pretty sure you're here today. You can see me afterwards for a refund. Many of you will not realize that at times our wonderful Lyra could be vehemently sectarian. If you don't believe me, you've never had the Shakespeare is better than Harry Potter discussion. And anyone who preferred the superheroes of DC Comics to those of Stan Lee's Marvel was a subspecies not worthy of humanity. The exception to that rule was DC's Wonder Woman, who is the only person in the world that could have given her beloved Sarah a run for her money. If I was one of Lyra's female consultants, she was my millennial consultant. She helped me understand the vast difference in the mindset between millennials, Generation X, and baby boomers. Top of that list was always punctuality. In addition to the many thousands of engagements that we had online, I've calculated that we met in person around 300 times. Many of these were memorable, but the one in particular that stands out was Sunday in April 2018. We planned to meet for dinner at one of our regular huts, but that was the occasion that Lyra was actually on time. The previous week, I'd walked her through the fundamentals of project planning and introduced her to the alien concept of contingency. At 19:01, she took great pride in sending me a message and telling me that she had mastered planning and had arrived early. I replied telling her that I was also delighted with her progress, but that this week's lesson would be geography and map reading as she'd gone to the wrong restaurant. That was the last time she was on time, but there was usually a reason, the most common of which is she'd stopped to talk to some homeless person that she knew on the route. She never said it, but I know that she always gave them half her dinner money so they wouldn't go hungry. That was our Lyra. When Lyra and I were together, we rarely talked about her work. It was a topic with a priority well below family, loved ones, and superheroes. I helped her with introductions on occasions, but only once did I participate in her research. That was a study into the 19th and 70s and 18s Belfast punk bands and their followers, and how they were able to bridge the difference between communities. This was a time when Belfast was a very different and divided city. Our conclusion was that the success of punk had much more to do with finding commonality than it did with bridging difference. If we were to analyse Lyra, she too would be a punk, a new age punk. No pink Mohican or safety pins, but she embodied the spirit of finding commonality, enjoying the difference in others, and if needed, having the conversation. In 1979, Stiff Little Fingers sang about an alternative Ulster, a great song, a war cry, a glimmer of hope. 40 years later, Lyra showed us what it took to live in alternative Ulster. Commonality, appreciation of difference, having conversations. Lyra and I often spoke about what she wanted to do with her life. Her goals were always simple: to be great at whatever she did professionally, to be happy, and for those close to her to have the same. But there was much more depth to Lyra. Despite her tender years, Lyra had the grace of Mary Robinson, the connected humility of President Higgins, the drive and fairness of Baroness Blood, the imagination of Tolkien, and the energy of Oprah Winfrey. With Lyra's passing, I believe that the towns, communities, and peoples of all of the British Isles have been robbed of the talents of someone destined to become an outstanding statesman. Our loss. I was fortunate to spend time with Lyra on Thursday, her last day. As her Uncle Stevie, I gave her her Cadbury's Easter egg. She showed me pictures of the ring that she had brought for Sarah and told me of the fabulous plans she had for the proposal in New York in May. She made me put a date in my diary for a wedding in Donegal in 2022. I was given strict instructions to wear my kilt, which she always wanted to borrow, adorn it with some Harry Potter, and to find or re-find my own version of Sarah. That was our Lyra. She had found something, in this case great love, and she wanted everyone else to have the same. As we hugged and said goodbye, Lyra looked radiant. I saw both the sparkle of the innocent girl I first met all those years ago and the beaming confidence of a young woman blossoming towards greatness. Our last words were a bit of a tradition between us, a brief exchange on whether it was quicker to drive to Derry or to Londonderry. However, by breakfast, her adopted home had a new name. To all but the soulless and the sick, it had become Lyra Derry. And hashtag Not in My Name was not a slogan, but an unstoppable movement. When people die, we miss them. When loved ones depart, we mourn. When a great are taken from us, it leaves a hole. Lyra's passing has left many holes: journalism, technology, all the communities that she was part of, her friends, and above all, her beloved family and Sarah. We have two choices. We can look into those holes and wonder forever what might have been, or we can fill them with what should have been. My generation sang and shouted about an alternative Ulster. Lyra showed us how to live it. Today we grieve, but tomorrow let us fill that hole by adopting Lyra's spirit, example, and vision. Let us put all the false starts behind us and once and for all build an alternative Ulster that we, and especially our children, can be proud of. Let us make the lasting legacy of Lyra McKee that peace. Thank you.
Impossible not to do. Possible not to do. Now I tell you openly, you
On the 31st of March, 1990, God gave the world the most precious gift. God gave us Lyra. But what God didn't tell us was that we wouldn't have her for long. Well, at least not as long as we would have liked. Lyra is many things to many people. But to us, her family, she is and always will be our baby. You see, our wee Lyra was the youngest of my mother's 6 children, and she was very special from the very beginning. I was 15 when she was born, and I could not have been more excited to have a new baby in our family. The excitement became overflowing as my mother gave me the honor and the privilege of being Lyra's godmother and being able to name her. When the good news of her birth finally arrived, I ran the whole way to the hospital. A truly unusual event, which has never been repeated. And like a magnet to its pole, I was drawn into the baby nursery and straight to the cot of the tiniest baby I had ever seen. As I looked down at our baby, she returned my stare, and I just knew she was ours. No one needed to tell me. It was like our souls called out to each other, brought us together, and fused us in love from that moment on. Lyra is an inspiration to many people. Her whole life story speaks of rising above or pushing against external challenges. In fact, if we were able to turn back the clock and look at her earlier life, you could be forgiven for thinking, that can't be Lyra McKee. But it is. When Lyra started school, she was already an auntie. And when my mum had to bring her, she didn't want to go and leave her Andrew. That is not very unusual for a youngster, I suppose. But if anyone had been socially minded and standing on the Covenville Road at 8:30 any given morning, you could have been forgiven for calling social services and reporting seeing a woman walking down the road, carrying a small child, kicking and screaming and wailing, with the tears and the snotters tripping her. Who knew that one day she would be giving public talks, writing books, and making such a lasting mark on the world? It's just totally amazing. We are really fortunate as her family to have millions of memories, which we could tell you all until the stars go out. So you'll be very glad to hear that I've chosen only a few, which apparently I only have 6 minutes to share. We'll see how we go. Our wee Lyra saw snow for the first time when she was 2. And it was on the night that our brother Gary came home from Canada. And when he arrived, she immediately took to him and wouldn't leave his side. Amongst many other things, he took her outside to see the falling snow. And she named it Gary's Snow. In fact, she wouldn't believe us years later when we told her that it was just called snow. In true Lyra fashion, she argued against it. Lyra is now well known as someone who makes a lasting impression on everyone she meets. And there is no better example of this than when she met my husband, John, for the first time when she was 3. On the first night they met, for some unknown reason, our Lyra was playing with a set of blue WWF dumbbells. And she wanted to engage her newfound lifelong friend and brother in a wee game without his knowledge. You know where this is going, don't you? She tossed a dumbbell to John, who was caught totally unawares in a place no man ever wants to be caught with a dumbbell. And that lasting impression, not the injury, created an unbreakable bond. As the youngest, Lyra was the focal point of our attention and sometimes our entertainment. Even when she was having a wee doze on the sofa, she could enact some hilariously comedic moments that became legendary within our family. Do you remember when we were constantly being bombarded by advertisements of the Time Life music collections on TV? Well, in our house, seeing as we were only allowed to watch Channel 4, because in Lyra's words, I like it, a short snippet of the song San Francisco would act as a form of mild torture to us on a regular basis. But as the 5-year-old Lyra slept, and we all sat in silence watching Channel 4, in her sleep she began singing, "If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear flowers in your hair." We all looked at each other, burst out laughing, woke up the child, and our brother David has never let her forget it. Strangely, our nephew, David Jr., didn't know this story. But on Tuesday, he picked a flower from his garden and gave it to his dad and told him to give it to Auntie Lyra. And now she is wearing that flower very proudly in her hair, and always will. Lyra never gloated about any of her experiences, but that didn't mean she didn't get excited. At the age of 10, she was asked to be our sister Joan's bridesmaid. She was so excited, traveling to Canada in October, going to a wedding, being a bridesmaid, and let's face it, to be missing school. Believe it or not, her excitement even surpassed her response to the news of the 2-book deal, and that's saying something. Although Lyra was our wee brain box, those who knew her would agree that her observational skills of normal things were not as fine-tuned as her speaking or writing skills. 5 years ago, while our mum was away, our Mary, another sister, received what has now become a very infamous phone call. Lyra had been staying at home by herself for a number of days at this point, and had yet to receive any of the domestic training that Sarah would eventually become responsible for providing. Anyway, Lyra phoned Mary as she realized that dishes do not, in fact, wash themselves as they do in Harry Potter, and was wondering where the dishwasher was. However, what she didn't realize was that the dishwasher they had in their previous home, that they moved from 2 years ago, hadn't survived the move. For the whole 2 years, our wee Lyra didn't notice the absence of the dishwasher. You can make your own judgments about that. Lyra has many nieces and nephews, but they are more than that to her. They are her best friends, her brothers and sisters, and her treasures. She always tried to make time to do something special with each of them, and always bought them presents that she couldn't always afford. No surprises there then. I'd love to be able to share stories of Lyra's life with every one of them, but we would have needed to bring sleeping bags rather than scarves to even scratch the surface. Everyone who knows Lyra will know that she had an extra special connection with her great niece Ava, the most photographed child in history. And she wouldn't be too happy with me if I didn't mention her here today. Lyra literally adored every cell in wee Ava's body. And the world and his wife saw the two of them getting up to all sorts of antics on Facebook. And thankfully, we will always have these images, so our 4-year-old Ava will never forget her greatest auntie ever. When Lyra met Sarah, her happiness was obvious to all. She phoned me. "Nick, I think I've met the one." Although I was truly excited for her, I advised her not to get too ahead of herself. But as most of you know, once Lyra made up her mind about something, there was no going back. And she went forward, full steam ahead. Lyra did not just meet the love of her life when she met Sarah. She introduced me to a new sister and expanded our family circle in a way we never expected. We are so pleased that Lyra lived the last few months of her life happily and looking forward to her new life with Sarah. We know that they made each other very happy, and we shared their joy. As spiritualists, Lyra and I do not believe in an afterlife. We know beyond any doubt that the human soul is eternal, that death is not the end of life, and that we are all welcomed into a spiritual existence after the physical death. The passing of our Granny Laurie in 2005 broke Lyra's heart. Their bond was indestructible, and we take great comfort in the fact that they are now together again. Putting everyone else first was a key characteristic in Lyra's character. And this is exemplified in her relationship with our mummy. Lyra and Mum were like Velcro, inseparable. There wasn't anything too big or too small that Lyra would not do to make sure that our mum got the best of everything and that all her needs were met. And she didn't care who she had to torture to ensure it. She must have phoned Mum at least 50 times a day, and I'm not even exaggerating. Sometimes it was simply to ask, "Are you okay?" And then a follow-up call to ask, "Are you sure you're okay?" And sometimes she was only upstairs. The absence of this will leave an unfillable hole in our mother's life. The pain of the absence of our Lyra from our mum's life will undoubtedly never ease. But we know that whilst a broken heart can never be mended and an empty space can never be filled, the unconditional love that they both share for each other will continue for eternity. Lyra often spoke of how proud she was of our mum for raising her single-handedly. And we should give credit to Lyra's mother, our mother, for ensuring that Lyra became the kindest, the gentlest, the most loving person that the world will never forget. Let's face it, none of us will ever be the same again. We have all been changed by the events of last Thursday. We don't have Dumbledore's time turner that will enable us to change the past. But within each of us, we have the power to create the kind of society that Lyra envisioned. One where labels are meaningless. One where every single person is valued. One where every single child gets the chance to grow up and to make their dreams come true. This is Lyra's legacy that we must carry forward. This is the gift that God gave the world on the 31st of March, 1990. And we are all responsible for helping God's will to be fulfilled. Each and every one of us. In the words of Lyra herself, we must change our own world, one piece at a time. Now let's get to work.
One door, not sure I know what it's all about, but I know your hand was worth holding. I don't know what lies ahead, those pages can't be read, but I know your heart was worth knowing. And maybe every step that we take is somehow guided by the hand One thing I know, wherever I go, you dwell in my soul. You dwell in my soul. Ooh. Ooh. I don't know who's right or wrong, where we go when we're gone, but I know your touch was worth feeling. Whatever life throws my way, with every move I make, I know your love won't leave. Maybe every step that we take is somehow guided by the hands of fate. One thing I know, wherever I go, you'll dwell in my soul. You'll dwell in my soul. You'll dwell in my soul. You'll dwell in my soul.
Second reading, a reading from the Gospel of St. John. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may also be. And you know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. Here ends the reading.
We're all fragile underneath. This coat of armor isn't thick or deep. And when we break, it's hard to hide the way we hurt inside. When I come undone at the seams, my heart is on the floor for all to see. Just do that thing that I need and wrap your arms around me. Oh, wrap your arms around me. Just wrap do our best to smile, fight the tears trying to creep from our eyes. But when a smile just won't disguise, it will crumble inside. When I come undone at the seams, and my heart is on the floor for all to see, just do that thing that I need, and wrap your arms around me. Oh, wrap your arms around me. Just wrap your arms around me. When I come undone with the seams, my heart is on the floor for all to see. Come do that thing that I need, and wrap your arms around me. Just wrap your arms around me. Just wrap your arms around me.
May I speak in the name of the living God. First of all, I want to thank Dean Stephen Ford for his kind invitation to give this reflection today, and also the very gracious welcome and hospitality that I have received today in this cathedral. I have no idea what you, Sarah, Lyra's partner, must have felt on Thursday evening when those shots rang out and Lyra was hit and fell to the ground. I can't begin to imagine what you, Lyra's mum, her brothers and sisters and the wider family circle must have gone through when Sarah phoned to tell you that Lyra had been shot. I can't imagine the agony of that drive to Altnagelvin Hospital knowing that Lyra had died. Many of us here in this cathedral have been praying for you and will continue to do so. Since the story of Lyra's murder broke on Holy Thursday into Good Friday, there has been an enormous sense of grief and solidarity with you from many people at this huge injustice, powerfully expressed by the President of Ireland, Agus an Taoiseach. Many, many wonderful things have been said about Lyra, including the warm and deserved tributes paid to her by the Secretary of State and MPs of all parties in the House of Commons yesterday evening. In death, Lyra has united people of many different backgrounds, as further evidenced by this diverse congregation at her funeral. Like so many others. I couldn't believe it when I heard the 7 o'clock news on Good Friday morning that Lyra McKee had been shot dead the previous night. I'd met Lyra on several occasions. We'd kept in contact by phone, WhatsApp, and Twitter. I would, however, have to confess that I wasn't aware of her great love of Harry Potter. I hadn't heard the term until I searched and
This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service.